morning to everyone that's out also via video. I want to thank everyone on behalf of the Bureau of Human Resources and the Affirmative Action Advisory Committee. I'd like to welcome you and thank you to coming to our first ever diversity training session. So I am proud, very, very proud to introduce to you today Andre Cohen. I shared with you all yesterday that I met Andre several years ago at an HR conference. Andre helps government and educational organizations manage and train staff, employees, and clients on diversity issues without blame, fault, or guilt. His organization understands that people are doing the best they can with what they have, yet encourages them to examine themselves, explore other cultures, and become allies for others. Andre works to move people's behaviors not by pushing them or by making them feel guilty. Andre is a leader in workforce diversity, cultural inclusion for government and educational institutions, so please join me in welcoming Andre to the Department of Natural Resources.
I have to say I get really embarrassed when I hear all those things that I've done over time, so that makes me a very good Minnesotan. I'm supposed to feel bad about all the good stuff that I've done. And it's very obvious that we have good Lutherans here because the back is full. At any point that you want fresh information, it's right up here in front. All right, so you get fresh information up front. I want to first tell you a little bit about the training that we're going to do today, because I would hope that it is probably different than anything that you've done before. At the same time, I will not solve all of the world's problems. I know. Come out of here. We're done. And also, I may not get through all of the slides in my PowerPoint. I want you to know, some people get anxious because they're like, what did he leave out? What did, we'll make sure you have access to all of the slides, but I may not get to all of those things, particularly depending on how we work together during our session. All right? So, we'll get started, and so sorry, I surprised myself. So we will we'll start with this video, and I'm not sure. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about me, and by the time we're done, you'll know so much about me. You'll be like, let's run away from this dude, right? But I was a high school teacher, and so I had to figure out how to engage my students. And so I don't know if you've heard of this music artist named T-Pain. I mean, some of you may have heard of this musical art, if you can call it music.
I have. I've heard of it.
Oh, you've heard of him. Okay. So he does this computer animated kind of voice. And one of the most notable songs that he did is "I'm in Love with a Stripper." Right? So you can, yeah, I know. So you can see kind of where his mind is and what he's doing. But he uses this technique that the kids think is new, but I know comes from Roger and Zach from way back in the day. More bounce to the ounce, ring any bells? Okay, all right. Anyway, so he uses this computer animated voice, and I found this video that also uses this computer animated voice, and I figured if T-Pain can use that computer animated voice for evil, then I can use it for good. So I'd like to start off with this video, and again, it's a computer-aided voice. There's also a subscript, so you can read that. But hopefully, you'll get the root and the hook of the message. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started with that.
Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination. Let us move on in these powerful days. These days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We got some were done made by the founding fathers, and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. That's a mythical basic thing, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to mountain top, and I look over, and I see the promised land. I may not be there, but I want you to know tonight, I see the people who will get to the promised land. I know about it, I'm living in the land. I see the glory of the 1962, when they rose in Albany, Georgia, they started to string their backs up, and when the men and women string their backs up, they are going somewhere across the land. Come on, you back and listen again. 1963, black people in Birmingham, Alabama, aroused the conscience of this nation, brought into being the civil rights movement. Later that year in August, they were trying to tell America about a dream that I had. And that's a mythical basic thing, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to mountain top, and I look over, and I see the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we are the people who will get to the promised land. That's a mythical basic thing, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to mountain top, and I look over, and I see the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we are the people who get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
All right. First of all, what are some of your thoughts about what you saw here? What were some of the things that came up for you as we listened and we saw that video? Yes, sir.
Very emotional, always. And I think of my kids and how, Dr. King's birthday was celebrated just very recently, and how they're learning about his legacy and how it's timeless.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I thought as I was listening to it, what a powerful speech that was, and how the music was extracting to me from the power of that speech.
Okay. Cool. Other thoughts? Yes, sir.
I just thought of the historical significance, how it's part of our past that we should embrace.
Okay. So the historical significance, how it's a part of our past that we should embrace. Yes, ma'am.
As I was watching the police and stuff, I was thinking of how similar things are happening now.
Okay. So how similar things are happening now? Yes, sir.
I was just reflecting on, I was able to do a tour of Selma and Montgomery as part of the leadership training thing, and went to all those places and talked to civil rights workers, and that was the speech I think that he gave the night before he was shot in Memphis, so I was kind of thinking about that, and it was just bringing some things that I've been able to experience before in life.
Every time I hear this, whether it's the song version, and I will tell you that young people really get into this, probably more so than us old guys. But what I found, what always strikes me whenever I hear it, whether it's the song version or the actual speech, is in fact that he gave the speech hours before he wakes in the morning and catches a bullet, before he's assassinated. And it almost brings tears to my eyes just thinking about the fact that he, in some ways, prophesied his own death, his own demise. But at the same time, I get lifted by the message that he gave. And what was the hook in the song, or what kept being repeated in that speech? One of the things was promised land. What else?
We as a people.
We as a people will get there. I saw another hand.
Always about the promised land.
Okay. Why do you think that Dr. King was using this promised land metaphor?
That's the American dream.
It's the American dream. Okay.
The right of everybody.
It's the right of everyone.
Well, it says, all men are created equal.
It says, what is
And
it?
that's the promise. I mean, we are promised
in what document?
The Constitution.
Okay, so in the preamble of the Constitution, we talk about all men being created equal. But why does he use this? And I don't know if you've read a lot about or heard a lot of Dr. King's speeches, but he uses a lot of metaphors in his speeches. He used the concept of the cashed check or the bounce check. In this particular speech, the mountaintop speech, he keeps referring to the mountaintop. He keeps referring to the promised land. What was his vocation?
Well, it comes from the Bible. That's Moses and the mountaintop.
Okay, so he is talking about Moses and the mountaintop experience. What I'll do is I'll try to repeat what people say so that the audience out there can get that. All right? Yes. So what Dr. King is talking about is his relationship to the struggle of the Israelites, right? And so the basic story of that is that the Israelites were imprisoned or slaved or held captive in Egypt, and then Charleston Heston came and said, "Let my people go!" Right? And so he goes running through the dry ground with the walls of water, and they get free and they get on the other side. But in the Bible story, unlike the movie version, one of the things that happens is that Moses gets to the promised land and is able to see into the promised land, but is unable to do what? To enter into the promised land. And so Dr. King, I mean, it just sends chills down my spine because he talks about the fact that he is at the mountaintop and that he has seen the promised land and is unable to get there. But one of the things that brings me joy or makes me excited is that in the actual story, what happens is that they get to the promised land, and Moses isn't able to lead them into the promised land, but they send spies into the promised land. And so they send these two guys, Joshua and Caleb. They go over there and they check things out, and they say, "Oh my goodness, this is the land of milk and honey. There are grapes the size of a man's hand. This is a fabulous place." There are also other spies that go out to do a recon. And they say, "Yes, you're right. There are grapes the size of a man's hand. There are rivers of milk and honey. But there are also giants there. And there are monsters there." And so they come back with this other report. And so who ends up being the leader as they go into this? Because they ultimately decided that they can defeat these monsters, that they have it within them to go in and take what was promised to them. Joshua and Caleb become those new leaders, and they take over. Now, one of the things that is problematic for Joshua and Caleb is that they had really big shoes to fill. They had a really great guy that they had to come behind, and his name was Moses. So they had to come behind Charleston Heston and do all these miraculous things that he did. And one of the things that they had to remind the people is that Moses was dead. They had to remind them to move on, to go to the next chapter in their life. They had to remind the people that Moses was dead. At the same time, and I know this might sound hard or unnecessary as a reminder, but we have to remember that Dr. King is dead. It's funny what we do to our martyrs. It's funny what we do to dead heroes. We accentuate all of their positives. We make statues of them. We put them in parks, and we just glorify what they did. And sometimes we forget that somebody has to pick up the mantle. And so in the case of the Israelites and Joshua and Caleb, will there be another Moses? Will there be another Moses? Probably not, right? Will there be another Dr. Martin Luther King? Probably not. His genetic makeup was very unique to his family line, right? Will there be another Mother Teresa? No. Will there be another Bishop Desmond Tutu? Probably not. Will there be another you? Now, the interesting thing is, all of these great people that I've just mentioned, Mother Teresa, Desmond Tutu, Dr. Martin Luther King, came out as small, weak individuals just like we have. They changed the world. And guess what? We can change the world too. Part of the trick that our media and sometimes even government, in terms of its mindsets of being either or, what they sometimes trick us into believing is that we don't have power, that we don't have influence, and that we don't have the ability to make a difference. We all have young people in our lives, be it nieces, nephews, sons, daughters, and I would imagine that the influences we have on them can change the world. Because the influences that people who came before us changed our world. All right? So, there's enough preaching. We'll move on to the rest of our workshop. So I want to talk a little bit about cultural competence on a need-to-know basis, because you need to know. And ultimately that the journey starts with you. All right? So our outline simply for today is to learn definitions and guiding assumptions about race and racism and cultural competence, increase awareness and understanding of individual, institutional, society, and cultural manifestations of culture, understand the conscious and unconscious mores in a culture, and understand the experiences of people who come from different racial heritages, and explore the cost and benefit of working to end racism through building cultural strengths. That's a lot to get through, and we'll do our best to accomplish that. So, we'll skip that stuff. We'll come to this picture because I think it's important that you understand a little bit about me and how I come to this work. And so here's a picture of me as a small baby. He's a cute little guy. And then this is my family in the 70s. This is me with the big bow tie that's almost as big as my head. And that's my brother Will and my sister Crystal. And I often ask my mom, Mom, why is my bow tie as big as my head? And why am I wearing this, tunic with straps and that kind of stuff? And she gave me the same response all the time. And she would say, that's the fashion. Right? So that's what she would say. And then here are my grandparents. And these are my two uncles, and that's my dad. And then this is our family in our Cosby years. If you look real close, you can see Theo. I said that once, and one of the folks in the audience said, "You're really a Cosby?" I'm like, right? And you can't see it real well, but this is me in high school, and this is my friend Samisha, and this is Sharon, and this is myself. And Samisha is holding an Uzi to Sharon's head. And I'm holding a double-barreled sawed-off shotgun to Sharon's head. Now, I know that might sound alarming, but context is everything, right? So we're at a concert, and I don't know if you know what the band plays, but the name of the band will give you the kind of atmosphere we were in. And the name of the band was Public Enemy, all right? And so I am my father's son. And in 1968, what was going on in the world? Vietnam War. What else? Civil rights was happening. What else was happening in 1968? What's that? The Democratic Convention in Chicago was happening. All right. I meant to tell you, because I don't want you to be alarmed, but I'm African American. Yeah, or black. It depends on the day, right? So what event in 1968 could have had a profound impact on my African American parents? The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. All right. So the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, and so at that point, my mom and dad were in high school together. They had just turned 18, they graduated, and my dad went to my grandparents and said, I want to do something about the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And my grandparents, being great suburbanites, said, great, do it someplace else, right? So my father goes off to college and he becomes a Black Panther. Now, I don't know what you know about Black Panthers or what you think you know about Black Panthers, but primarily they were a political party whose platform was raising people out of poverty, and specifically black people. And one of the programs that exist today as a result of their efforts is something called the Federal School Lunch Program. And so the federal government said, wow, Panthers, that's a great program. We hate you, but we'll take your program. All right? And so my father became a Black Panther. Now, in 1970, just 2 short years later, the most amazing, incredible, beautiful thing that could ever happen to my father happens. At that point, he realizes that the revolution is no place for a family and that the retirement plan for revolutionaries sucks. Right? So he leaves the revolution, he cuts his afro, and he gets a 9-to-5 square job. And on that job, he gets a call from God. Now, what happens when you get a call from God? You answer, right? I was in one session and the gentleman stood up and he said, "You run!" I said, "Okay, Jonah." Right? So my father became an evangelical, fire and brimstone, Bible-thumping preacher. Hallelujah, yeah! Amen. I am my father's son. So if we get a little bit political in our conversation, it's not my fault. And if it feels like I'm preaching to the choir, in the words of my father, the choir needs preaching too. All right? So we'll move on. So I want to show another clip and then get you moving around a little bit and having some really powerful conversation. So this is a video that many of you may have seen on America's Funniest Videos, or maybe you've seen it on YouTube or something like that. By the way, a number of the resources that I use in terms of videos are things that I found on YouTube. So they're not top secret information or anything like that. YouTube can find this kind of stuff as well. So I'll start this video now. What was it that tickled your fancy? Why do we find that humorous?
Been there.
Okay, so persistence. And someone said, "I've been there. I've been there." Why else do we find this humorous?
Cute baby.
Because it's a cute baby. All right.
He only cries when people are watching.
He only cries when people are watching. Yes.
The baby's persistence.
The baby's persistence. All right. Cool. So, what is happening? Let's talk about that. Well, what do we see happening here?
He wants attention.
We see that the kid wants attention. That what? that he's faking it, right? Because he can get himself together, you know, and transport his behavior someplace else. All right?
Being ignored.
That he's being ignored. Yes, ma'am.
That the mother knows exactly what he's doing.
And the mother knows exactly what he's doing. Now, the funniest thing in the video for me was not the baby, but the dog. I was cracking up just watching the dog, right? Because he's like, you guys should see what he's doing when you're not around. All right. So we know what is happening. Do we know why? No? Okay. Yes? It's just like, I'm just going to say the opposite of everybody else, right? So we may not necessarily know exactly why. I will say that we do, but not in the typical way that we kind of think about stuff, right? So we may not necessarily know the why, but I'm going to give you the why. Because it's obvious in his tenacity, right? Because can we assume that this is not the first time this has happened? Right? It's probably not the second time either, right? So why does the baby consistently use this kind of behavior to try to get what he wants? Go ahead.
Past learned experience.
It's past learned experiences. I heard it over here because it has worked. Now, we are, as a species, we build on success, right? We create mental scaffolding, if you will. So if it's worked once, and I come to a similar situation, I can make the assumption that what? It'll probably work again, right? So I can build on that scaffolding to create my learning. And so if it's worked in the past, if I come to a similar situation in my present, I can make the assumption that it will work. Which also means that if I move and I look towards the future, that if I see a similar situation that could happen in my future, then I can make the assumption that that behavior should also work. So it worked in the past, it should work in the present, which means it will work in the future. When does this baby change their behavior?
It doesn't work.
When it no longer works, when it doesn't work? Is it working now?
I think it's not.
No. Well, it would be safe to say or to assume that his behavior is not working now. But he keeps exhibiting the same behavior. Why? It's not working, but he keeps doing the same thing even though it's not working.
Doesn't know another way.
He doesn't know another way. It's a learned response. Yes, sir?
He hasn't learned what else to do.
He hasn't learned what else to do. All right? We know that his behavior is not working. The parents know his behavior is not working. The dog knows that his behavior is not working. But who fails to realize that this behavior is not working? The kid, the child. So when will the child's behavior change?
When he realizes.
When he realizes that it's not working, right? So we'll talk about that in a little greater detail. Here are some human truths that we have to assume, and this is also in your handout. That humans can learn, change, and grow. We are the sum total of our genetic experiences, our cultural upbringing, and all of these things, and we can be more than that. We're not limited by our genes. Now, I can't be as tall as some of those NBA players. I can't manipulate my genes in that way. But it's not the size of the fighting the dog, but the size of the dog in the... No, how does that go? Right? So we can be more than the sum of our parts. We can learn, change, and grow. People do what they think works, even when what? It doesn't. Right? So in the case of the baby, he kept trying it because he thought it worked, even in fact when it did not. All right? All human behavior is goal-directed. We are all trying to get to some place, trying to do something. And so children, typically teenagers, aren't as articulate as we would like for them to be. So we ask them about why they've made a decision or why they've done this particular choice over this one, and they typically say to us what? I don't know. Right? When in fact, we do know that they had some kind of goal in mind in their behavior. All right? And that attitude is a reaction to a goal. What have you been taught about an attitude? What is an attitude? Have some of you had attitude? Right? So what's an attitude?
Mental state.
Yeah.
It's a mental state.
Frame of mind.
It's a frame of mind.
How you approach something.
How you approach something. Attitude. Right? As a kid, I had a lot of attitude. And my parents would tell me about it. And one day my parents, said to me, Andre, go to your room till you learn how to act. And so I went into my room and I hung out for a while. And then I stepped out into the hallway and I said, to be or not to be? I spent a lot of time in my room, right? Because that's not what they were talking about. And so it took me a long time to figure out exactly what it was. And then one day I got it. So I told you that my dad was a pastor. He was my pastor. And so we would open the church on Sunday at 7:30 a.m. And we closed the church at 11:30 p.m. We stop at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we're black, but because chicken is delicious. So all day Sunday is church. So on Friday night, I asked my dad to borrow his car. And because my dad loves me, what does he say?
No.
He loves me. He says yes. So I get the car, I hang out with my friends, I put gas in the car, I come home before curfew, and my father says I have what kind of an attitude?
Good attitude.
I have a good attitude, right? What do I say about my dad's attitude? That he also has a good attitude, right? So Sunday rolls along, and my best friend Dexter calls me at noon, and he says, Andre, can you pick me up for the movies? What do I know about Sundays?
You're booked all day.
Church all day. But I'm feeling kind of risky because Jesus is my friend. If you call on him, he'll answer prayers, right? So I go up to my dad and I say, Dad, can I borrow the car? And what does my dad say? No. Not only does he say no, but he gives me a lecture about how I'm leading people to hell, right? Every negative consequence in my household, the ultimate consequence, was you're going to hell. And either I will send you there or you can go on your own. So attitude. So I would say that my dad has what kind of an attitude? A bad attitude. And what would he say about my attitude? That it is also bad. Right? So what is it that actually determines one's attitude? The perception of the person, your relationship to the person, yes. Timing, expectations.
I was going to say desired outcome.
Desired outcome. And what do we call desired outcome?
Goal.
We call that a goal. When I achieve my goal, I have a good attitude. Or when I'm denied access or slowed access to my goal, I have a bad attitude. I don't know if you've ever been a teenager or been around teenagers, but you can see this happen with them, right? So you give a teenager what they want, and it's almost as if they purr and they coo, right? And they want to snuggle up to you and be all nice. But deny them access to their goal, and they have the crappiest, and as my grandmother would say, the funkiest attitude. That's F-O-N-K. Funkiest attitude in the world, right? You're like, am I related to you? What is going on? Right? So if I encounter a person with a bad attitude, what do I know about that person for sure? That they're not achieving their goals, right? So if I encounter a person with a bad attitude and I know that they're not achieving their goal, there are two things that I can do as a helper to help them achieve their goal. The first thing I can do is what? Yeah, find out what their goal is and help them get it, right? In customer service, a lot of times we'll have folks from the community come in and they'll have a bad attitude. And one of the worst ways to interact with people is to ask them, Can I help you? Has anyone had that kind of customer service where somebody will say, can I help you? Right? That's the wrong question. Why? Because you're paid to help me. That's why I'm here. Right? So you can help me. But a better question is, how can I help you today? Right? Let me find out what that goal is, and then we can meet it so you can have a good attitude. But what if you encounter someone who has a goal that is not possible? It's not, you can't reach it, you can't help them with that. What now becomes your responsibility?
Help them change their goal.
Help them change their goal, right? A lot of times, particularly when we work in governmental systems, we feel really constrained by the rules, the policies, and the regulations. And so we tell people what they can and cannot do, as opposed to giving them the framework from which we operate and having them make choices that help them reach their goals, right? So a lot of times people get frustrated with us in government because we do have these limitations, but instead of giving them what those limitations are and having them make choices, we lay those limitations right on them. And then we become rationers of resources, and we become rationers of blah, 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 and things become very subjective, as opposed to giving people the information and having them make the decisions and the choices. All right? So a goal is directly related to your attitude. Now, why am I going over these four things, these four truths? Because I don't know if you know someone who is bigoted or who is racist or who is sexist or who may be homophobic. I don't know if you encounter those people. You probably don't have them in Wisconsin like we do in Minnesota. But one of the things to remember about those individuals is that whatever state they're in, however old they are, they can change, they can learn, and they can grow. All right? I'm going to tell you how to do that with them a little bit later. All right? That those same people are doing what they think works, even though it may not be working for them. All right? Or it may not be working for me. Right? And they're also goal-directed. There's something that behavior has gotten them in the past that they make the assumption that it should work in the present, and they will continue to use that because they can make the assumption that it'll work in the future. All right? And lastly, that their attitude is goal-directed. So in some ways, they must be achieving something because they wouldn't have these goals, or they wouldn't have the attitude that they have. All right? Does that make sense? All right, cool. I don't want to hit you with too much mumbo-jumbo, so we'll keep moving. And so the core question is, for those individuals, what is the ultimate goal? And the ultimate goal is that people are looking for these three things. They're looking for significance, belonging, and safety. All right? Significance basically says that I have a purpose, and I'm able to live out that purpose. Belonging says that I'm a part of a group, a community that recognizes my significance. And safety basically says that I'm in stable situations, stable relationships, stable state of mind that allow me to continue to get these other two things. And so when we look at human behavior and we can boil it down to these three things, things become much more clear to me as to why people do what they do. Right? And so when I look at women, for example, in my relationships with women, what are their ultimate goals? Right? To have some kind of significance, belonging, or a sense of safety. When I look at the work that I do with my Asian brothers and sisters, although I don't understand a lot of their cultural norms, I don't understand some of those things, but I can understand that what they're doing is trying to help them do what? Get significance, belonging, and safety. My white brothers and sisters, right? I may not understand all their norms and their cultural, like Lutefisk, I'm still trying to figure it out, right? But I know that they're trying to get significance, belonging, and safety. And because I'm trying to get the same thing, if I recognize that they're trying to also achieve those same things, we certainly can work more collaboratively, and I can seek to understand rather than just be understood. All right? So that is that. So before we go to this next piece, what I'd like for you to do, in your packet, if you can open it up, you should see a square that's broken into 4 smaller squares. What I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you in each of those squares, I want you to write down one thing that you value in each of those squares. So one thing that you value in each one of those 4 squares. All right? It could be a concept that you value. It could be concept, it could be a noun, it could be a person, but one thing that you value in each one of those squares. One thing that you value. It could be a person, a concept like peace, love, freedom. It could be a place like your cabin, your home, your basement home theater system, the garage, and like that. One thing that you value. Let me walk around. That fourth one is kind of tough, isn't it? All right, it looks like most people have at least 3. So what I'd like to do is I want to play a game. And the game is very simple. What I'd like for you to do is to find 2 people for each one of your squares. All right? I want you to find 2 people for each one of your squares. Once you've found someone who either has on their paper what you have, or they agree with what you have on your paper, I want them to put their initials in the box that they agree with or that they share, that you share with them. All right? Is that clear? All right? Yes, I have a question.
Do you have to agree with it, or do we have to have shared that on your square?
Yes. Her question was, do they have to share it or do they have to agree with it? And my answer was yes. All right? So I'm going to give you about a minute and a half. On your mark, get set, go.
get in the audience?
I know we're live. You got something in that.
Yeah, man, move right. I'll stop now.
Yeah. 30 seconds, 30 seconds. Five, four, three, two, one. Game over. So right after this, we'll take a couple of minutes break so people can take care of their biology, get lots of brownies, refill on coffee, and that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to ask really quickly, as you were going around the room, were there things that were a delight or a surprise to you about what you saw in someone else's paper? Any delights or surprises, and would you like to share those? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I had an empty space.
You had an empty space.
Someone said, I like that.
Oh, you had an empty space, and somebody came along and signed in that empty space. Cool, cool, cool. Any other delights or surprises? Yes, ma'am.
Someone had happiness, and I moved the other.
Someone else had happiness on their paper.
Yeah, and I signed that right away.
Okay, so yeah, she's like, I signed happiness right away. I saw a hand in the back, and then I'll get you, sir. Yes?
Someone had sincerity.
Sincerity. Someone had sincerity. That was a delight or surprise. Yes, sir.
Someone had almost all the exact same as mine.
Someone had almost the exact same as you had. You were raising your hand as well, like, yes. Oh, it was the two of you? Oh, okay, cool, cool, cool. Oh, yes, sir.
The number of people that put health.
The number of people that put health was surprising to you. Or was that a delight? It was a pleasant surprise. So it was a delight. Yes, ma'am.
There was somebody who had self, and I think that we forget about that.
So someone on their paper had self, and sometimes we forget about the self as we go through our lives. There was another hand over here. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't find anyone else who had jobs.
Okay, you didn't have anybody else that had jobs. Well, let's just squelch that now. If you value your job, please raise your hand. All right, good. All right. Was there any place where someone did not get a signature, where you weren't able to find anybody that valued what you value? Yes. The self. Okay. So let's do it like this. Please raise your hand if you value yourself, even if it wasn't written on your paper. All right, good, 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 good. Was there another person who was not able to find someone or has an empty space, an empty box? Yes, sir.
I found someone right at the end.
Okay.
That was knowledge.
Okay, knowledge. All right. So you
right at the end. I found
right at the end, you're able to find someone that also valued knowledge. What do you think the point of this particular exercise is? Yes, sir.
Show us how we're all alike.
To show us how we're all alike. I saw another hand over here. What we have in common. A lot of times, and I don't know, how many diversity trainings you've been in, or cultural competence trainings, or whatnot. But a lot of times we spend so much time talking about the things that make us different that we don't spend enough time talking about the things that make us more alike. And I would venture to say that in our human experience, we are much more alike than we are different. All right? So on that note, let's take a 6-minute break. All right? All right, I'll see you in 6 minutes. Thank you.